Hello, my name is Katie Blodgett. I'm the 2015-2016 Episcopal Service Corps member here at the Association. Thank you for tuning in to the Advocacy 101 presentation, using stories and statistics to lead to systems change. So what is advocacy? Advocacy is a tool utilized across sectors and organizations, and it's centered on education and creating awareness about a certain topic, social need, or maybe program that you have at your organization. It really seeks to share true stories, results from maybe recent studies that you have created at your organization, and maybe just the current state of things. And it's a tool that will hopefully help lead to policy and systems change. So what's the difference between advocacy and lobbying? Like I said earlier, advocacy is an educational tool, and its focus is on spreading data and true stories to all that might be involved. Lobbying seeks to influence decisions made by legislators and encourages them to act in a certain way regarding bills or votes. A helpful phrase to keep in mind is all lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. So does advocacy matter? When done with intention and thoughtfulness, it can carry a lot of weight. A study done by the Congressional Management Foundation asked, if your member or senator has not already arrived at a firm decision on an issue, how much influence might the following advocacy strategies directed to the Washington office have on his or her decision? A surprising only 8% responded that visits from a lobbyist had a lot of positive influence, whereas 46% responded that an in-person issue visit from a constituent, so that's just the normal person, had a lot of positive influence. Now, an important disclaimer to share. Since advocacy and lobbying are very similar, it is imperative that you research what your organization can and cannot do in regards to lobbying. For any charitable organization, there are limits on how much money and time can be spent doing lobbying, who can lobby, and things like that. So it's vital that you're aware of the limitations. So during this presentation, we're going to be going over some of the most commonly used advocacy techniques. Those include story banking, using technology, letters to the editor, calls to your legislators, meetings with your legislators, sharing testimony, and using studies and publications to share your knowledge. So the first technique we're going to go over is story banking and story sharing. Many organizations serve vulnerable populations that are oftentimes voiceless in the larger public and political setting. This can serve as a helpful tool by giving a voice to the voiceless and sharing their stories. So step one in creating any kind of story banking or story sharing project is to think about the end product and plan for it. You want to think of creative ways that this can be done. What questions do you need to ask? Who's going to be the primary target audience of your end product? Here at the association, we collect stories by having people write them on paper plates. Maybe that's helpful for your organization, or maybe a small recorded conversation is more applicable. A small video segment, maybe just listening and gathering stories. Step two is going to be actually gathering those stories. You want to go to where the people are. So do you need to go to hospitals, community organizations, libraries, summer camps? Whose voice do you need to hear from? Be sure to be courteous and get consent, especially whenever taking pictures or videos. And you know what? This might be an ongoing project for your organization. You'll be gathering stories whenever you go out into the community. And be sure that all the voices that you want to hear from are represented, so you go to wherever the people are. And step three of this is creating the product. Like I said, are you making a video? Is it going to be part of a report? Whatever you decided to do with the stories, go on and make it. And some kind of pro tip for you is to actually keep a database of the stories that you collected. Make sure you log them, who said it, where they came from, and what their story is. So that way, whenever you need to hear from a specific voice or hear a specific story, all you need to do is look at your log and figure out who said it. Like I said, here at the Ohio Association of Food Banks, we have a paper plate advocacy project. We ask people at food banks, at food pantries, to write on paper plates what having access to this food means to them and their families, and what they would say to legislators if they could. The second technique we'll go over is the use of technology. It seems like these days everyone has a Twitter and a Facebook and maybe even an Instagram. And advocacy done using technology can be one of the easiest things to do. Reactions and interactions on social media are almost immediate, and it's a very accessible platform. Most organizations have Facebook or Twitter accounts, and you know what? So do most legislators. So no longer do you actually have to go down to the State House to meet with them. You can just tag them in a tweet. So there are many ways that we can use technology. Some of them can be the wrong way, but there are lots of ways that you can use technology to your greatest advantage. I would say that the first way you can use it is to follow people and organizations that don't align perfectly with you and your organization, so that your organization is more informed and up to date on whatever else the other voices are saying. It's also important that you follow like-minded organizations too, in order to repost and cross-post specific tweets or blurbs, and that way you can stay in the loop about what's happening with like-minded organizations. It's also really helpful to tweet out easily digestible tidbits of information. Did you just release a study that has a really compelling statistic? Do you have a story-banked story that you just can't wait to share? Is there a link to a study or a report that you think your followers would be interested in? That's what tweeting is really good for. And it's also a really great way to keep your followers updated on your work. They can see what kind of studies you're working on right now, what kind of current projects your organization is using, and hopefully that'll just keep them up to date and make sure that they're following you. So in this slide, I just have some good examples of the Ohio Association of Food Banks Twitter account. So in the first couple, you can see it alerts your followers to the current events. So this is all about current bills or legislation that are going through, or current service opportunities that are available out in the community, like the Stamp Out Hunger. It's also really helpful to share study results, like I said. So there was new Map the Meal Gap data that we tweeted out and wanted to make sure that our constituents and members knew about. And also it's really helpful for cross-posting and tagging like-minded organizations. We follow a lot of our same member food banks, and also a lot of community organizations like Community Solutions that are involved in doing the same kind of work that we are. Our next technique we'll go over are letters to the editor. So these are usually written in response to a recent published article, and they're used to thank, to add to the information shared in the article, or to be used to show another side of the issue that the article brought to light. Sometimes you'll be writing on behalf of someone or some group, like maybe a school district or a certain group of people. So it's really important that you're aware of your tone and your voice. But no matter what your stance is for the letter, it's important that you have a strong voice and that you write a compelling letter. So what are the basics of writing letters to the editor? It's definitely best kept between 200 and 250 words, so be as succinct and to the point as possible. You don't want to take up a lot of space in letters to the editor. And sometimes it'll be more appropriate to lay out just a whole bunch of statistics, just really share the facts. But sometimes it's more appropriate to just share one very specific and compelling story. You decide what's the best reaction to whatever article was published. And always be aware of your voice. Be sure to mention the newspaper and whatever article that you're writing in reference to. That way they'll be sure that there's a cross-publish happening and people aren't just wondering why you're writing a story about this. So on this slide, I have a letter to the editor that was written by Lisa Hamler-Fugit on October 27, 2015. And it really does a good job of going through what the basics of writing a letter to the editor are. You want to make sure you mention the article and the newspaper that wrote the article. You want to include applicable facts. So that sentence of, since 2013, our trained and educated marketplace navigators have helped more than 21,000 Ohioans. You want to really just lay out whatever kind of facts are necessary. And then kind of towards the end, you just really want to get to the point. What's the point of why you're writing this? Is it to show another side? Is it to really agree with what was written in that original article? Or is it something completely different? The next technique we'll go over are calls to your legislators. Organizations will sometimes send out mass emails asking supporters to call their local or national legislators and advocate on a certain issue. Many times, the emails that you'll receive will have specific talking points to mention and will be in reference to a specific bill. It's important to remember when you call, be respectful on the phone. definitely explain who you are and why you're calling. And remember that most of the time you're going to be talking to the legislator's aide. So just be as respectful as you can. Calls to your legislators are a great way to show where you stand on issues, that you're involved, and that you're paying attention. Our next technique is actually going in and meeting with your legislators. So it's really important that you approach this meeting collaboratively. Legislators can definitely not be experts on every topic in the world. So seek first to educate them on the facts and what you're involved in. What is your organization? What does it primarily do? What do you primarily do? And what is it that you're seeing? It's really important that you just share with the legislator what you're seeing. Meetings with them will most likely last only half an hour or so it's really important that you stay on topic. Most of the time, you will be able to stay on topic, but sometimes the legislators will want to be steering the conversations to a different direction. So definitely feel free that you're able to steer the conversation politely back to the issue at hand. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind before you ever meet with a legislator. Number one is definitely know what kind of issues the legislator's been involved in. What kind of committees are they on right now? And how have they voted for certain things in the past? How have they voted on whatever issue that you're concerned with? And then the second one to remember is to bring an organized packet or folder with any of the kind of handouts that you have, any of the kind of basics about your organization that you think would be really helpful for that legislator to have. I think maybe we can sometimes be pretty intimidated by legislators, but it's most important to remember this, that they're just people too. Their job is, ideally, to do the will of the people, and with you meeting with them, you're hopefully showing them a different voice. Your voice and those that you represent matter. The next technique that we'll go over is sharing testimony at any level of government. So there might come a time when you think that it's really important that you share your side of the story with any legislators who are in the process of making a bill or legislation. So this is done in the planning phase of a legislation, and you're most likely going to be presenting to a committee. You know what? They're meeting to go over the pros and cons of that legislation. So your voice is really helpful for them to determine which direction to take it. There are a couple things to remember before you testify. You want to make sure, number one, that you have your remarks typed up, including any important statistics, stories, firsthand knowledge, recent updates on the state of the issue at hand, anything that you think is compelling and would be helpful to add to your testimony. The second is, when you're writing up this testimony, make sure you're collaborating with whoever you need to in order to ensure that you're giving the most influential and well-rounded testimony as possible. And number three is, when sharing your testimony, you'll want to be clear, organized, and compelling. So here's the scoop on sharing testimony. Like I said before, it's really important that you remain respectful during your testimony. You are, after all, talking to legislators, and you want to show them that you're giving them your respect. It can be really easy to also get swept up in the emotion of it all, but it's really important to remain calm and use the platform that you've literally been given to advocate best for your cause. And then this might take you by surprise, so it's really important that you know that there's usually a Q&A time at the end of your testimony. So stay calm, answer the questions as best as you can, and if you don't know the answer, be honest. Tell them that you'll get the answer and get back to them. Our next and final technique we'll go over is using studies and publications to aid in your advocacy efforts. You know what? If it's a new year, there is new data that's out. Every year, the Census Bureau and a lot of other independent research firms and companies release a lot of new data and statistics. Use that data. Write up studies, reports. Use the stats, like I said before, as blurbs on social media. Numbers really help reinforce your story. Are things getting better? Are they getting worse? Do the numbers and the stats match what you're seeing and the stories that you're hearing? Studies and publications can really help show and grow what the advocacy efforts are at your organization. I'm frankly amazed at how much data there is out there to use. On this slide, you can see this is just 3 examples. There's data from the USDA Economic Research Service, there's census data, and there's Map the Meal Gap data. And all of this has been used to generate reports and to show legislators and community members and citizens just what the actual current state of hunger and poverty is in Ohio. So there you have it. We've been over the basics of advocacy. Now you can get out there and advocate. Here are some first steps to take. Start small. It doesn't have to be a huge project that you decide to undertake. Pick one or a few to focus your energy on. Maybe you really like the idea of social media. Maybe you really like the idea of story banking. And watch your advocacy grow at your organization. Second, there are so many advocacy endeavors that are done in tandem with one another. Like I said, using social media to blurb out all of the new studies and reports that you've generated. And lots of our advocacy efforts are actually done in tandem with other organizations too. And it's really important that you have a united voice and that you're giving one cohesive message. So really be in touch with what the other organizations are doing. So I think a lot of times in our especially polarized political climate, we can think that we can't do anything to influence change. But I found this quote by Margaret Mead and thought that it was highly appropriate for our advocacy efforts. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Your voice matters, and whoever you're talking for, their voice matters too. So whatever your advocacy efforts are, I hope that they can just keep growing and growing. Thanks for tuning in.